Farm to table. At Iowa Corn, we know this concept is more than just a trendy social movement. It's a way of life. And around here, the farm is never far away, and the table is always full. This day and age, people are finding it more important than ever to know where their food comes from, and we're excited to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the journey it takes, from our local farm to your dinner table. Welcome back to another episode of Farm to Table with Iowa Corn, Hungry for the Truth with Dr. Ruth edition. I'm Kristin from Iowa Girl Eats, and today I'm excited to tell you we're going to be answering all of your burning questions about food. Now, as a mom myself, nothing is more important to me than knowing I'm doing the best for my family, and that includes knowing all the facts about the food I feed them every day. Today I'll be joined with Dr. Ruth MacDonald, Professor and Chair of Food Science and Human Nutrition at Iowa State University, who will be answering questions that were submitted on social media over the past few weeks. Now, when it comes to food, nutrition, and the science behind it, there's no better person to talk to than Dr. Ruth. Are you hungry for the truth? Let's get started. Dr. MacDonald, thank you so much for joining me in Iowa Corn today. We're really excited to learn more about food and health and nutrition, and many moms like myself, there's a lot of questions surrounding these topics, separating fact from fiction and just learning more so we can feed our family safely. And that said, I asked my followers, and Iowa Corn asked their followers, their burning food questions, and so we have a few of those questions we'd like to run by you, if that's all right.
Sure.
First, could you tell us, what you do here at Iowa State and in your background?
Sure. I serve as the chair of the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition here at Iowa State University, and so our department has majors in food science, culinary food science, dietetics, nutritional science, and we just started a nursing program. So we're really all about how food is made, what's in food, and how it affects our health, and how we can use food in a way to prevent illness.
And how long have you been with the university?
I've been here about 17 years.
Wow. And I know you're a real expert in this field, which is why we're excited to have you answer our questions. Well, one of the questions that we got over and over, and there's so much buzz about, is high fructose corn syrup. Could you tell me a little bit about it, and what is the fact versus fiction about high fructose corn syrup?
There's been a lot of concern and a lot of misinformation about high fructose corn syrup in the public. It sounds scary because it says high fructose, and people don't, first of all, know what fructose is, and they don't know why it's high. And that's really just a result of the way that high fructose corn syrup is made. It's made from corn syrup, which is a natural product grown here in Iowa and places around the Midwest. And it's a substitute for sugar. It has the same composition, chemical composition, as table sugar does. It's different in the fact that it comes from corn rather than from sugarcane. People are concerned about the amount of fructose that we consume, but they really should be concerned about the amount of sugar that we consume, and it's all kinds of sugar. High fructose corn syrup is just another form of sugar, as is table sugar, as is honey, or all of those other sweeteners that we have in our foods. There's no special reason why high fructose corn syrup would be a concern for health. It has no risk for human health other than just having calories in it.
So is it safe to say that the body treats high fructose corn syrup the same way it treats sugar from beet sugar or cane sugar?
Yes, it does. The composition chemically is pretty much the same.
Switching gears a little bit, here in Iowa, corn is king, and corn-fed beef is really largely available to the general public. That said, there is the option to buy grass-fed beef. So can you talk a little bit about the difference nutritionally between grass-fed beef and corn-fed beef?
There's very little nutritional difference between beef that's been produced from animals that have been grazed, because all cattle are grazed up until the point of finishing, and that's the big difference. So grass-fed continue in the pastures throughout their life, whereas finished beef will go to a feedlot where it gets more high nutritional feed, in usually corn and other nutrients. So they're not just getting corn, they're getting a very scientifically balanced diet that allows them to put on more muscle in a very short time. So when you look at the amount of nutrition in the beef that comes from cattle, either way, it's the same. It's a very high nutritional value product, contains nutrients that you don't find in other forms of protein foods. It contains iron and it contains trace minerals like zinc that we need for a healthy life. So there's no nutritional difference. There's some evidence that the grass-fed beef might have a little bit more omega-3 fatty acids. That's what usually gets in the press. But the quantity is pretty small.
Okay.
And yeah, it might be a little bit more, and that's good. Omega-3 fatty acids are something that we don't get enough of in our diet.
And what role do you see farmers playing in helping consumers feel safe about the food that they're eating?
Consumers believe farmers and they trust farmers and they want to know where their food comes from. So I think farmers have a responsibility to communicate to consumers how they do farming. Most people don't have any contact with the farmer. It's like 1.7% of the population is engaged in farming. So when you think about the amount of misinformation that can be spread very quickly through the internet, you can see how people who have no knowledge about how a farm works or how farming is done being confused and believing things that might not be the reality. And it really is incumbent on all of us to communicate that better to consumers about how farming is done and the ways that farmers use technology to be more responsible for the environment, to make food safer and higher quality, and not be out there to destroy the environment, which I think there's a lot of belief that farmers are using technology and they're using a lot of chemicals because they don't care about what happens to the environment. And that's not true. Farmers live on the land that they farm, and they do care about how it impacts the broader perspective of the world.
Right, I mean, they leave their farms to their children and their grandchildren and eat the foods they grow and raise, and
Right.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too. Food dye is another super hot topic, especially among mothers feeding foods with food dye to their children. What are your thoughts on food dye?
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy and interest about food dyes. There's differences in the US and in the UK on how food dyes are allowed in foods, and the question is always given is, why do we have them, right? Because they don't add anything to the food other than just enjoyment and making it look good. The scientific evidence, though, on hyperactivity and food dyes is really very weak. The studies that have been done have been pretty unspecific about finding a relationship between hyperactivity in children and the amount of food dyes that they consume. Trying to be more careful about the amount of food dyes that are being consumed is probably a good idea. They don't add anything nutritionally to your diet. They're just there for pleasure. But to be very concerned about them to the point where you've changed your child's diet and put them on some very strict, limited food probably is not going to make a big difference in their behavior.
Okay, so foods, for example, like Jell-O or colored cereals, your recommendation would be moderation, or?
So the amount of dye that's going to be found in those food products is pretty small. So having Jell-O once a week or breakfast cereal every other day is not going to give you a very high dose of those dyes. But both Jell-O and the colored cereals are going to be sources of sugar. And so we always have to be mindful of how much sugar children are consuming, because that is a serious problem in the US, that children do consume too much sugar.
Okay, let's talk vegetables. So this is another hot topic with moms, especially feeding our families and especially our children's as many vegetables as we can. So, how many vegetables should we be eating? How much should our children be eating? And really, what are the healthiest vegetables to kind of reap all those benefits?
Yeah, the more the better. Fruits and vegetables are very beneficial for children and adults. And so the more you put in your diet, the better. I think 5 servings a day is generally recommended, but going up to 7 or 8 is also a good idea. And any fruit and vegetable is good. There isn't one special fruit or vegetable that everyone should be consuming. Variety is really important. There's lots of different colors of fruits and vegetables, and we always recommend that you get different colors. The greens and the yellows and the reds and the purples all have different bioactive compounds that we know are beneficial. Getting a variety is always important. And I think the concern that people often have about fruits and vegetables is the organic versus the conventionally grown. And I always tell people, you don't have to buy organic foods to be safe. There are regulations about pesticides and residues in fruits and vegetables, and they're always very low. And more fruits and vegetables and paying a higher price to get organic and limiting the amount of fruits and vegetables that you consume is not as healthy as just being open to consuming as many fruits and vegetables as you can.
Right, so not limiting yourself to a certain amount or type of vegetable or fruit simply because it's organic, and maybe be open to opening yourself up to others. Absolutely. To get more variety.
Absolutely. Yeah, the risks of pesticide residues are very small compared to the benefits that you get from fruits and vegetables.
Swinging to the other side of the food spectrum, let's talk comfort foods. You know, what's your take on processed foods like hot dogs and, you know, how often we should be indulging in foods like that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of concern about how many ingredients are in a food and whether if it's in a package it would be unsafe to consume. And as a food science, chair of the department here where we teach students about food and food processing, we know that we process foods in a very specific way to reduce the cost, to make them shelf stable, to give the variety and interest to foods. And all of the ingredients that are in those foods are monitored and approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Processed foods kind of fall into that comfort food zone, right? So whether or not you should eat hot dogs or whether or not you should have frozen pizzas are things that people worry about, and they really shouldn't be. Now, we all, as nutritionists, always say moderation. You shouldn't consume a diet that always comes out of a box or the freezer case. You should be eating fruits and vegetables, as we mentioned. Feeding kids SpaghettiOs or a hot dog or letting them have a frozen pizza once in a while is not going to ruin their health if you do it in moderation and you always have other healthy foods in their diet on a regular basis.
What are your thoughts on the modern food system and how it has changed from the way our grandmothers ate to the way that we're eating now and feeding our families?
I think there's been a lot of concern about our food system, and even with this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of discussion about how we process food and where food comes from and how people's diets are impacting the food system. And we in the business of food science and nutrition have known for a long time that our food system is complex and it's really evolved over time to be what it is today. We have high quality food. You can go to the grocery store in Iowa in December and buy strawberries because we have a food system that gives consumers what they want. It's really about the choices that we make within our food system that relates to our health. Can you choose a very bad diet with our food system today? Absolutely. Can you choose a very healthy diet with our food system today? Yes. So it's really about how we understand nutrition, how we understand our food choices, how we make decisions for ourselves and for our families, and really using the food system to our benefit. We know that we have an influence on what the food industry does, and we should use that power effectively.
Well, Dr. MacDonald, we live in Iowa with a very strong agricultural background, and it's our responsibility to share a message of a safe food system and food source from Iowa to the rest of the country and the world. So I really appreciate you sitting down with us to kind of separate fact from fiction and discuss all of our food and health and nutrition questions.
I do feel very strongly that science is important and everyone should have the access and the information that they need to make healthy choices for themselves and their family.
We really appreciate your time and your expertise, so thank you. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Farm to Table with Iowa Corn. Do you have questions about food and nutrition that weren't answered today? Visit iowacorn.org/education/food to learn more. Check back to the Iowa Corn social media channels and join us on our next adventure where we'll be giving you another behind-the-scenes look at how your food takes a journey from farm to table.